4 years ago, I was over-the-road truck driver running my own trucking business. Today, I'm a software developer building mobile apps for a Fortune 100 company. And here's how I learned to code without getting a computer science degree or going to a bootcamp. I already told a short version of my story on other platforms, but today I want to talk about that and all the struggles that I went through to switch careers. And let me tell you, it took me 2 full years to do it. And those were the most challenging and most stressful 2 years of my life. But before we get to that, let's go back to 2019. I was 26 at the time, and I've been driving trucks for 4 years. And I was also making great money for a 26-year-old. On top of that, I was married and my wife was pregnant with our first kid. I mean, life was great. Now that I think about it, I really had it all. I had everything a man could ask for. Aside from my truck breaking down a lot and costing me a lot of money to maintain, I didn't really have any other problem. My life was great, it was looking up, but there was something missing. Something was nagging at me. I really wanted to do something different with my life. I got sick and tired of the trucking lifestyle, especially now that we are expecting a kid. I wanted to be home more. I wanted to be with my wife. I wanted to be, to be with my kid. I wanted to spend more time with my family. And being a truck driver wasn't it. It wasn't cutting it. So I started watching videos like this one, videos of people going from a non-traditional background, people going from a manual labor, blue collar jobs, learning to code and getting into tech. They did exactly what I wanted to do. And I kind of watched a lot of those videos to the point that I convinced myself, you can say I brainwashed myself, that I could actually do it. Out of all the videos that I watched, there is this one video that stood out. It is by Andy Starkwoods. His story is amazing, and I probably watched this video close to maybe 1,000,000 times, and I was daydreaming of doing kind of the same thing he did. I was daydreaming of, quitting my trucking job, learning to code, and becoming a developer. Somehow, I was daydreaming of my current lifestyle. I was daydreaming of where I am today 4 years ago. And before I get to how I did that, let me answer why first. I've always been into tech, not the coding side of tech, the actual technology, laptops, computers, games, modern games, and I've also had an Android phone that I overclocked, installed custom ROMs on, and I also went to college for an IT degree, but I ended up dropping out because college wasn't for me. Anyway, here's my genius plan to go from a truck driver to a developer. The first thing is to sell my truck, get out of the trucking business, and get a local trucking job where I have a full time to take care of my wife and kid, and also have a lot of free time to learn to code on the side and apply for tech jobs. To be honest with you, this was a solid plan, especially that I gave myself 2 full years to make the transition. And it didn't work out. It didn't work like this. Unfortunately, my truck kept breaking down a lot, and it just cost me a lot of money to keep it. I woke up one day in Wheeling, West Virginia, and my engine was leaking oil on one side and fuel on the other. And I just looked at it, and that is when I decided that, you know what, this is it. I'm done. I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm just going to drive home all the way to Minnesota and call it a day. That is it. And that was the last drive. That was my last drive from Wheeling, West Virginia to Minneapolis, Minnesota. That was a very, very long and silent ride. I remember that. I thought about every possible scenario, everything that could go wrong with this, with what I'm about to do, with this transition. And every one of those scenarios somehow came true, except one, is that I actually made it. This was one of the worst case scenarios that I wouldn't make it. I made it, but everything else, every other worst case scenario did actually happen. You know what? Looking back at it, it looks funny. It is funny. I'm laughing right now, but it wasn't. It wasn't. When you are going through it, it is not funny. It is not funny at all. That was on April 2020. But my son was actually born 2 months before that. That was one of the main reasons I called it that day. I couldn't I couldn't push it back any further. It was a now or never kind of deal. I came home, my wife knew about it. I told my siblings, my mom, and people close to me, and they were like, that is not gonna work. That is not how it works. And we are up. Okay, they didn't say that because they are a bunch of haters. They said that because we are immigrants. A lot of them actually told me to just go back to college, get a 2 year or a four year degree, and just try to get a tech job after that. And I thought about that, but I didn't want to do it because I somehow brainwashed myself into this whole self-taught developer path. And I've watched a lot of videos that convinced me that I can actually make it. And I had a plan. And also my learn to code plan was really simple. All I was going to do is learn how to build mobile apps, apply for jobs, get a job building mobile apps. It was really that simple. I already knew that I wanted to build mobile apps because mobile apps are fascinating. I made this video going over why I chose mobile apps over websites. I will link to these videos down below. You can go check them out. But anyway, I knew that I was going to build mobile apps with a framework called Flutter, and I already bought the course and I already started on it. So by the time I came home, I had everything planned out. All I was going to do was study for 12 to 16 hours a day, 6 months straight, learn as much as I can, and then apply for jobs. And I did exactly that. In the first 6 months, I got comfortable with using the IDE, learned how to build different UIs, different screens, how to navigate from one screen to another, how to hit up an API, get the data, deserialize the data, process that data, and show it in the UI. Anyway, I felt like I knew enough to apply for jobs. And that's what I did. My first interview, my first recruiter reaching out to me was in 2020. It was for a startup building a financial app, but it turned out to be a bogus app. The app didn't exist, and the startup founder defrauded investors for I think about $2.5 million, and he is serving a jail time right now. Looking back at it, I'm glad it didn't work out. It didn't work out. And I kept studying 12, 16 hours a day, every single day that sometimes I didn't know what day it was. It was a Monday or a Wednesday. I didn't know that. And it didn't matter because I was doing the same thing every single day. I'm a morning person. I would get up 6, sometimes 5, sometimes 4 a.m. if I wake up with a with a solution to a coding problem that I was stuck with, and just start my day and get to it. That is literally all I've been doing. Coding consumed my life. I was dreaming of coding. I'm not kidding. I'm not even kidding, people. Listen up. I would code all day, go to sleep, dream of me coding all night, wake up, code all day. That was it. I just didn't do anything else. At the same time, I was applying for jobs and getting rejected all day, every single day. But one thing I noticed is the more I learned about coding, the more I interviewed, the more I knew what I was talking, the more interviews I got, the more I advanced into the second and third rounds of different interviews. So to me, I took that as a sign that things were getting better. I was learning about complex features such as offline support, caching data, persisting user session. I was also learning about listing my app on the App Store and the Google Play Store. If you are a mobile app developer, you have to have an app on the App Store. You have to know how these two different stores work. You have to know the listing process. Once I went through all of that, somehow that in of itself opened up so many doors. Now I could talk about the App Store policies. I could talk about what are required for an app to have to be listed on there. I learned about what is called a trivial app that is not supposed to be on the App Store, and all these different legalese. They actually helped me also in my interviews. I could talk about them like I knew what I was talking about, even though I kind of did, because I spent a lot of time reading through the Apple App Store terms and conditions. Yes, I did actually read a very large chunk of it. I was also learning about different concepts such as the async programming, which a lot of people say that it is difficult, but to me, it wasn't. That part of coding wasn't a problem to me, but I struggled a lot with state management in Flutter. I'll be honest with you, I spent most of my time struggling with this one concept. I can safely say that it took me over a full year to understand it. I don't know why, it just wouldn't click. But now I can handle anything. I can handle Anyway, I kept struggling with these concepts and getting rejected, applying and getting rejected over and over again. It is now 2021. That is when I got contacted by a startup out of okay, I'm not gonna say that. Anyway, they wanted me to come on board as a mobile app developer. They had an old project that was sitting there collecting technical debt, and in exchange, they would give me equity. And guess what? I didn't care about that. I took the job, and someone in my position doesn't have the luxury to pick and choose. And I chose it because I wanted to have a company, an officially looking company on my resume, and I could also use them as a reference. And let me tell you, I used my CTO as a reference to every single job that I applied to. He took care of me. Every single job that I put him as a reference, I actually got the call, I got the interview, and I advanced to multiple rounds. Even to my current job, I put him down as a reference. Hey man, listen up. You know who you are? Thank you very much. And the funny thing about that startup was they got me on the team to build the app. But when I actually got my hands on the code base, I was shocked by how big it was. That was my first time seeing a code base this big. They just handed it to me. Take care of it. To be honest with you, I had no idea where to even begin with it. They say this is going to take you a few days, 3 to 5 days, to kind of familiarize yourself with the project, to see how it works, to understand the code base. And then you're going to start working on it. I feel dumb for saying this, but it took me 3 weeks. 3 weeks, and I knew what I was looking at. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew what I was looking at. I could look at the code and I could understand it. And the next step was to actually run the code and use a lot of breakpoints, a lot of debugging to understand how these things work, why this value is expected to be this, why it isn't, which actually somehow helped my debugging skills. And it also helped me understand how the code flows. There's a difference when you are actually looking at the code, you have an assumption of how it works. But once you run it, it behaves differently. So I had to understand why that wasn't the case. Anyway, I made it work and I reworked about 80% of the code base to the point that I actually knew every single line of that code base. From that moment on, my learning to code shifted to this project. I was learning on an actual project that was live, that I actually listed on both the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store, that I was actually responsible for, that I was actually updating, fixing bugs, adding features, meeting with the designers, meeting with the guy on the web to kind of sync between the web and mobile, and also the back end guys to see how, to understand how the back end and the front end works together. And that was really, really very valuable learning experience for me. And yeah, it didn't take long for me to get my first paying job after that. In October 2021, I got my first paying job at another startup, which I actually made this video about. It was a horrible place to work at. I'm not going to go into the details. If you want to go, you can watch this video right here. But I only lasted 2 months at that place. I had to just quit. It just wasn't worth it. And then I was back to being an unemployed loser. But I was still learning more and more about different and more complex topics. This time I got into this clean architecture, and I learned the basics of it. I learned how it works. I learned how abstraction is a hell of a place to be at. Listen, I'm not gonna say anything about it, but I did learn the basics of it. And then I got a job in March 2022. This was basically how I made it from a truck driver to a software developer. So if you want to end this video on a high note, this is your chance. Just make sure to subscribe down below, and I'll see you next time. Because right now I want to talk about all the personal struggles that I went through over those years from April 2020 to March 2022, because I have only told my coding journey, the whole learn to code journey aspect of it, but changing careers from a non-technical background to a technical background while having a wife and a newborn kid and so many other responsibilities, it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. It was the most difficult time in my adult life. So before I get to that, I'm going to take you back to 2020 at the beginning, and I'm just gonna focus on my on the personal struggles of the whole journey, because I wasn't just struggling with coding. My wife and my son were my top priority, my number one priority in this whole transition. So, and I wanted to make sure that whatever I did didn't affect them in any way, shape, or form. So, my wife was and still is a stay-at-home mom. So she's home, takes care of the kid, and I have to take care of everything else. And I wanted to keep doing that even when I was learning to code, even when I was unemployed for a year and a half. Yes, I was unemployed for a year and a half, but I had a lot of savings. I had my business savings, I had my personal savings. I also tried to do some Uber and Lyft on the side to just supplement that. But then again, I realized that the return on investment was not there. I was putting in a lot of time. I was putting in a lot of mileage on my car. I felt like I could spend that time learning to code just to get it done with faster. That's why I stopped doing that. And also another thing about getting a local trucking job, I tried that, but it turns out to be that it wasn't as easy as I thought. It is not because I don't have enough experience. I had experience. I had clean driving record. I had all of that, but it was because of COVID, the whole lockdown. You guys remember that? Yeah, and I didn't talk about it because a worldwide pandemic was the least of my worries. I got a lot of stuff going on in my life that I didn't care. To be honest with you, I didn't really care about that. So I couldn't get a local trucking job, and my savings weren't enough to last us 2 full years, especially accounting for my other commitment. So I'm not going to get into the details, but I'm just going to give you a glimpse. So my other responsibility told me that learning to code, trying to do something different, getting into tech, changing careers is none of their business. It doesn't really matter to them because I'm now an unemployed loser. Yeah, that was a horrible thing to say to someone. But hey, listen, I'm not blaming anyone. That was a long time ago. But yeah, that also didn't help with the whole savings account. So financially speaking, my business savings was drained to zero. Personal savings drained to zero, and I started getting into debt. I got into so much debt in those 2 years that I'm still paying them off to this day. This is a part I have never talked about before, and I don't like talking about it. To be honest with you, I don't like talking about my struggles because it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right. I was struggling with coding concepts. I was struggling with getting a job. I was getting rejected a lot. I was struggling with this whole new responsibility that I'm now taking care of, and I was also struggling basically with this other responsibility and my finances that were dwindling. As you can see, it is a lot to take in. But if you think that was the end of it, I wish that was the end of it, but no. So back when I drove trucks, I actually had a chronic back pain that I still have to this day. I went to a doctor. They did an X-ray. They said you don't really need an MRI. So they told me that. Let me preface this. I was 27 at the time. My son is not even a year old, and they told me I have arthritis at the age of 27. When I just had a kid that I have to be physically strong for, and it is also a boy, I have to be physically stronger. Yeah, it wasn't funny back then. This kind of came out of this to be. It took me a minute to process this. So I dropped out everything. I dropped out coding. Couldn't even go to sleep for a few days. It was tough. It was tough. And the crazy thing about all of this is It is all happening at the same time, all day, every day. For those 2 years, I felt like I didn't catch a break. And I actually used the whole learning to code as an escape from what was going on. All I had to do was just focus on this code for 12 hours, 16 hours every single day. So I didn't have to deal with what was going on. And guess what? There's more. Those 2 years were insane. Obviously, I'm not gonna get into my personal details, and there are about 40% of things that I'm not gonna talk about online, but some people didn't like how I was living my life and they decided to voice their opinions about it. But before we get to that, I want you to look at it from their perspective. I was unemployed for a year by then. I just had a kid. My son is not even a year old, and my wife is a stay-home mom. So looking from the outside, it looks like I am failing. It looks like I'm a low-life loser. It looks like I'm irresponsible father, which I am not. But looking at it from the outside at that time, I can definitely see why. And some people around me took the liberty to go to my wife and ask her, why is she married to a low-life loser? Some other people also took the liberty to go to my siblings, to go to my mom, and also ask around, why am I unemployed? Why am I not doing anything with my life? Why am I a low-life loser? And to be honest with you, dealing with this was more stressful than dealing with the state management solution or why your code is not behaving the same. It just hits different. It just hits different. And it wasn't funny. Believe me, it wasn't funny. To be honest with you, they actually have a point. All of this was self-inflicted. All I had to do was keep driving trucks, keep taking care of my wife and kid, and not try to do anything different. None of this would have happened. I wouldn't have spent all of my business savings, personal savings. I wouldn't have gone into debt. None of this would have happened. And I did believe them, and I did believe it for a while. And I wish I could tell you that it didn't get to me. But you don't go through all of that and come out of it unscathed. I wish I could tell you that I was the same person, the happy person, the optimistic person that I was. I would be lying if I did. During that time, I became resentful. I became jaded. I was becoming someone I didn't like. So I had to keep it together and just take every punch, everything that was coming at me, and act like I was unscathed. And to be honest with you, one of my unfair advantages in life is that I have high stress tolerance. I can deal with a lot for a long time before it gets to me. But I was redlining the whole time. The punches kept coming in and I didn't catch a break. There was a moment of hope that came in 2021. So my wife got pregnant with our second kid. That was the moment that I was actually genuinely happy. I was like, dude, this is amazing. This is something that I can look forward to. No matter what I'm dealing with right now, this is a beautiful. This is something beautiful that I can look forward to. It was great. I was genuinely happy for that. But unfortunately, it didn't last. My wife, she had miscarriage, and it was. When you're dealing with all of that, to be honest with you, I had every single right to become resentful. And I got resentful. I was dealing with a lot, but I also had to fight that. I didn't want to become jaded. And I'm glad that I still stuck with this whole learn to code journey, that I stuck with my original plan, and thank God that it actually worked out. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if it didn't? Can you imagine after everything, I still couldn't get into the tech industry? That would have been crazier. That would have been. I wouldn't be here talking to you. You wouldn't be seeing this video, which makes me somehow think about the whole survivorship bias. But that is a topic for another day. Fast forward to 2024, my life is 1,000 times better than what it was in 2022. Right now, I do have a job and I do make six figures, and I also work from home. So this is my home office, which is also my YouTube studio, and I made this video about it. It is still humble. I really want to work on it, get a standing desk and make it fancy. But aside from that, my son is going to be 5 years old in a couple of months. We also had a daughter. So the third time was the charm, and we have this beautiful daughter. She is a year and a half old right now. To be honest with you, she's the best. She is the best. That's all I'm gonna say. And there is another great news that I'm not gonna share right now, but you can connect the dots. Right now, my life is a lot better than what it was. I have no reason to be jaded. I have no reason to be bitter. My life is doing great. Alhamdulillah, thank God. God pulled me through a lot of hard times. All I'm gonna say is life is good. God is great. And shout out to also my older brother, who somehow became my de facto therapist. He also helped me financially when I was going through bad times. He paid my rent in a couple of occasions, more than a couple. You know who you are. Thank you. And of course, my wife. I'm not gonna go online and talk about my wife. She knows all of that. That's all I'm gonna say. And I also work for a cruising company, which this year we actually went on a cruise vacation, my wife and 2 kids. We came back about 3 weeks ago. We had a great time. And this is why I will never call myself self-made, because no one really is. You get help from people around you. And I'm not gonna sit here and give a motivational speech, but I just wanna say that if you wanna change your life 180 degree, you can make it. But then again, it is not gonna happen in a matter of weeks. It's not gonna happen in 3 months. If anyone tells you that you can learn to code in 3 months and get a 6-figure job, it is BS. It is all BS. And at the same time, if someone tells you that tech is dead, that we're all gonna lose our jobs, that is also BS. Both ends of the extreme are the same. It is just that tech goes through booms and busts. It took me 300 applications to get my first job. 300 applications. Right now, 300 applications is just a weekend's work. But back then, 300 applications to get your first job was kind of unheard of. 300 applications in a year and a half to get a job that was paying me, my first job was paying me $26 an hour. So yes, there's always a struggle. Nothing is easy. You will struggle in life, and that is part of life. So whatever dark time that you're going through, whatever struggle you are going through, it is temporary. It will pass. And before I end it, I just want to say that if you are struggling, if you're going through hard time, my first advice is find God. That is all I'm gonna say. Not gonna elaborate on it. At the end of it, just make sure that you are who you wanna be, that you don't have any unresolved issues that you are still going through. And it's okay to go through that. Just make sure that you resolve them. Just make sure that there is an end date. Anyway, that is my story on how I went from a truck driver to a software developer and everything in between. That is all I have for today. Subscribe if you want to see more content on learning to code, getting into tech, and mobile app development in general. And I'll see you next time.